Welcome to Take It Live. My name is Eric Ducker. I'm the Senior Partner Manager here at Brightcove, so I get the pleasure of working with a lot of the technology and agency partners that help deliver your video strategy today. And what is Take It Live? Well, Take It Live is a new series that Brightcove's kicking off to really take you behind the scenes about how to actually execute on your video strategy. And today, we're going to be talking about live streaming. And to help us in that discussion, we've actually invited our partners FORA.tv, and today we have the founder, Bob Appel. Thank you for joining us.
Eric, thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the president and head production person at FORA.tv. I was there in 2006, a founder when FORA.tv's inception. And despite my youthful appearance, I've been involved in production for just about 40 years.
That's awesome. It's amazing to have a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's great to have a wealth of knowledge, for our audience today. And really for today, the audience should be thinking about a couple goals and a couple takeaways. One being the go-to-market strategy to successfully pull off a live stream, but also the technical aspects. And we'll talk a little bit about who's involved, what's involved in actually making this happen. Before we get into the Q&A that I've put together from common questions I've heard from customers, a few housekeeping items. We have a couple ways for our viewers to interact with us. You can follow us on Twitter at #TakeItLive. You can watch the feed to the left of our, or to the right of our player here. And then also below, we have a chat roll going so that you can ask your questions there. And if we find a good question throughout, we'll interject or we'll keep it to the end of the presentation. So let's start off with an easy one for you,
Sure.
Bob. What are the common challenges that you see customers having when they're live streaming?
Well, first of all, the most important thing is that there is a developed campaign and a viewing and conversion strategy, right? And that's often the thing that's left off the wayside when it comes to the live streaming. They've done it around the event, but not necessarily thought that through. But the most common challenge, believe it or not, in this day and age, is to have an ample, stable, and wired internet connection at the venue. You wouldn't believe how often that is just not happening.
Yeah, and I think today we're really going to dive into the viewing and conversion strategy a lot. And so how do you overcome these challenges? And we'll just start kind of at the high level there.
Sure. Well, basically, just like any other kind of production, you want to do a lot of pre-production, right? So you want to be in touch with your points of contact on every single team. So as far as the internet connection and ISP on site, you want to have, you want to be hooked up with the IT person at that venue, that IT team at that venue, which is more challenging sometimes than you would think, because maybe there's a roadblock put in between you, the production team, or the client, or the agency, and that IT person. We have expert streaming and internet networking engineers that can help that venue, solve some issues, not just to say like, hey, are you giving us what we asked for, but we can also help you. And then also, it's like you really want to be in contact with all the marketing and event divisions on the client side, right? And again, it's pre-production, it's pre-planning. You don't want to wait till the last second. And then one thing that you could do to help with the bandwidth issue is that we have a device that uses wireless in an emergency, integrating several providers at one time. So sometimes we can solve that problem without any connectivity connected to the venue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that you don't know what you don't know, and technical aspects of making sure that the internet is there and that it has to be wired. You don't know that until you start talking about that. I can admit to that from a couple years ago when I first started talking with you. I didn't know that was the most important thing to get right. And so, that's why it's important to work with a team that does know it. And I think that's really why Brightcove is partnered with FORA.tv, and FORA.tv is partnered with Brightcove, is that it's an end-to-end solution that we provide. And when you're making that huge investment in a live event, a live stream, you just want to make sure it goes right, and you have to be able to overcome those challenges.
Well, another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot is that there are still some kinds of venues like hotels that have antiquated fees connected to connectivity.
Yeah.
And so in let's call it the early days of streaming, if you wanted to have several different instances, streaming instances, it would require more equipment on site and more bandwidth, because you'd have to have the originating point be that venue, right? And so if you need another 10 megabits per second of bandwidth at one of these hotels that has that kind of fee structure, it might cost you $5,000 for that extra bandwidth. And so now we have the connectivity called FORA.tv Blast, where we can go out to several distribution and endpoints all at once, just using one HD stream on site there.
Absolutely, and I think you bring a good point, and specifically, obviously internet bandwidth is more on the execution side, but what's the most important thing to plan for before you kind of get started with that event?
Right. Well, so again, it really, what we bring to it along with Bright Cove is an integrated solution, right? So it's not just live streaming, but what we really think is that you do about 95% of the work, leading up to the event. You've got your caterer, you've got your staging, you've got your agenda, you have your marketing around selling tickets. You're only 5% away. You've decided to do the live streaming. You're only 5% away from doing the live streaming right. And that, and again, not to just press the point too much, but not unlike any other campaign, you need to have that full vision in the campaign and planning beforehand to reach your end goal. Why are you live streaming? Yeah,
and I think you mentioned it before, which is, one of the examples is that distribution and reaching that audience.
Right.
And I think you guys talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's important to, in that planning, really have a handle and talk about with your marketing teams where you think your viewers are most likely to view that stream, right? And that's where you can have these different instances, a Bright Cove player, very, very stable on the home site, but also going out to these other very common, and I mean, more and more often people are saying, hey, we want to do all these things at the same time.
Yeah.
Periscope, Facebook Live, YouTube, and a Bright Cove player.
Yeah. And that's what Blast does, is really that.
That's what Blast does, that's right.
And that's really helpful, and I think it's important to have the technology in place to be able to do that, because really what a successful strategy is getting people from a lot of audiences and bringing them into one controlled experience. And that's really what the Bright Cove gallery product offers, is that controlled experience that you drive viewers back to. And a product like Blast allows you to reach that audience in the places that you can't spend as much control on.
Well, that's right. You don't want to limit yourself to just one destination, but that's not to say that each destination is equal. And so you bring up a great point. Something like Bright Cove Gallery is a really great curated experience, right? Where you can have your event portal, but also have a place and a portal for the on-demand video, surrounded by all this information that creates a funnel for these kinds of live streams. So in other words, if you go up to your Facebook live feed, when that thing is over, it just keeps getting pushed down further and further and further and further. That's not a curated experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you want to use something like that for is driving that audience back to your brand, right? So you have a lot of interaction, but is it meaningful? Is there any conversion involved there?
Yeah, it's kind of like a mini customer journey within a single campaign, a single event, because ultimately that live experience is the product that you're trying to drive people to and convert on. So it is interesting to have that same mindset of how you market your own product and your typical line of business, and how you market a live event. So I want to move on to kind of some more strategy talk, and talking about what's your biggest suggestion to make live events more successful? As we know that event conferences are typically the ones that are streamed. So how do you make those more engaging?
Well, right. So first of all, there are all sorts of different kinds of plugins and modules that you can use to get questions from the online audience that keeps them engaged. It feels, what kind of experience when you have a moderator on stage at the event in Los Angeles taking a question from a viewer in New York, right? There's chats, of course, and there's polls that can be taken. There's lead generation. There's all sorts of things and calls to action that you can incorporate. Also, you really do want to be creating digestible highlights during the event.
Yep.
Right. So you have your.
We're doing that right now.
We're doing that right now.
I hope
we're
our
doing that
team
right
is
now.
doing that right now.
That's right. And we're going out to many platforms at once.
Yes.
We're using FORA.tv Blast. We have
Yeah.
a Bright Cove Gallery instance
Mm-hmm.
happening so that it has that curated feel. We have chat, we have people sending in questions.
Yeah.
We have broadcast quality graphics as people are seeing on the stream,
Yep,
going so it looks
absolutely.
like television and things like that. But it's basically like, you want to pick the right content for the right viewers on all these different platforms. And they can be different. So your marketing team knows, the client's marketing team knows that brand better than anybody. So what we do together, Bright Cove and FORA, is to work with them to facilitate on a technological and editorial as well, and get those digestible highlights out there during the stream and after the event to drive people to the van or the brand or the funnel that we've been talking about and lead to the end goal, and have those actionable items there at the end and basically conversion, however you measure your ROI.
Yeah, let me stop you there because I think you bring up a good point, which is it's been really bothering me lately, is that the only stream I ever see at conferences is the keynote. And for me, I'm like, it's cool to see the vision, the messaging of the company, the big talent of whether it's the CEO or a celebrity. But as a buyer, not only do I want confidence in the company, but I want to make sure that they're solving my problem. And honestly, the problem that I have is typically not answered by the keynote. And so if I can't make the trip out there for whatever reason, whether I'm in a foreign country or I'm on the other side of the country,
right?
How do you create that experience so that someone like me can really engage with the content of the conference? That's beyond.
So first of all, let's cut the clients a break, right? I mean, the truth is that there is a lot of energy put into the main plenary room, let's call it, right, where those keynotes are happening, and the keynote speakers are what is perceived internally and externally as the quote unquote rock stars of the conference. And that's the room where there might be multiple cameras and great staging and great set and great lighting and all these kinds of things. So they put all this investment in that room, and of course they want to stream the keynote. But you're absolutely right that if it's a business summit, or if it's a technology summit, or if the end goal is building community or having other kinds of services and products that are sold, or brand awareness and things like that, or political conference, I mean, a lot of the magic happens in these breakout rooms. And so if you're going to have your conference be online, there should be some important information disseminated there from those breakout rooms, right? And so what's really great is that we have the technology now. Let me take a step back. If it's not in a curated situation, then it's kind of, it's hard to find these breakout rooms. Do they have to be different player instances? Are they on different players on the website? But we have something called FORA.tv Flip, which is basically the apparatus for one player instance happen in a Bright Cove player and other players, where you can have all these breakout rooms, and not just in one venue, but you can have a multi-venue event and have a curated viewing experience where the viewer chooses what room or what session they're going to watch. Because we all know that you can guess what the most popular sessions are going to be or where the magic happens, but you don't always know for sure. And you should, you're not sitting in someone else's chair, and they may have another point of interest that you don't have. So why not give them the experience of being able to choose the channel that they want to watch, basically. And
I think it's fair to give the audience in all live stream conferences the benefit of the doubt. It's new, and the whole aspect of live streaming your conference is new, and we're still seeing companies who are reticent to doing it. But more and more people are hopping on the train, and the first thing to do is live stream the keynote. But I think that's important, is that the technology is not the blocker here. It's really the desire and the proof in the ROI.
Well, I mean, it's again, just to add to that, many conferences after the main sessions, after the introduction, the keynote speech, go to more than one breakout room that are happening concurrently, and you can do that in a more affordable fashion, 1-2 camera shoots instead of the 5 camera shoots for the plenary and things like that. But basically, again, the folks can't be in two places at once. So it's not just for the online audience, but what a great feature for the attendees of a big conference, where they go out to the coffee stand out in the hallway, and they're in one wing of this gigantic conference center or hotel, and they're going to step back into the session, the priority session, breakout session that they went to, but the other one they're interested in is on the other side of the building. And if they could go onto any device, their phone, and call up that session down the hall, and then return to the session that they chose first, what a great feature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's change gears, because I did promise the audience that we would do a little bit of a backstage, access to some of the stuff. So we're going to talk more about the technical things, and I think it's important to, one, give credit to everyone in the room, in the multiple rooms that we're in right now. But who are the different people that are necessary to pull off a live stream?
Well, first of all, like the old stereo adage, it's like the quality of your sound with the stereo is your weakest link, right? Like if you have awful speakers, it doesn't matter how great
Hopefully we're not too bad.
Yeah. That your sources, your player is, and things like that. But basically, we have right now, right? It's a pretty, this is a pretty sophisticated stream, even though we're in the FORA.tv studios here at the Center for Investigative Reporting.
Yeah.
We have a director. Can we show that fourth camera? There we go. We've got Alex there directing. We've got Sean stream teching. And of course, on the we've got Molly in the room. Let's see. Let's show one cam up here. Do we have that?
I don't think we have it set up.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
And
just keep rolling.
that's okay. And we have, and there are people that go into the planning, graphics and editorial people. So we have some pretty sophisticated graphics that you've seen here. We've got a rotating watermark bug with both of our brands on it.
Yep.
And guys, why don't we just roll Eric's lower third here? You can have a static lower third, but you can also have an animated lower third. Look at that, right? Right? It's
Exactly.
TV online. That's basically what it is. And then we provide remote engineers, as well as Bright Cove has remote engineers as well, so that there are people watching the back end. So you can't possibly be doing everything at once if you're concentrating like Sean is on stream teching in the venue, right? So when you get to more sophisticated or bigger shows, there are multiple camera people. You could have somebody being a technical director where you have your DP behind that director calling the show, producers that help, runners, grips, lighting, it goes on and on and on. As we like to say, events are not homogeneous by nature, they're heterogeneous, right?
Absolutely.
And so what we do together, and we do it in partnership with Bright Cove with a lot of our clients, is that in that planning process, we go discover and know the right questions to ask to find out what the spec or what their vision is for that individual stream. And the good news is that our two teams have been doing it for so long that there's not many situations we haven't seen. So I don't want to call it, like you get a giant menu of items, but but we've seen it all before, and we keep up on the latest and greatest, and can provide that heterogeneous spec.
Experienced people is very important. So
that's right.
What about the hardware necessary? And we don't need to go into all the different aspects, but I think some of the big ticket items.
Well, right. So first, I'll just mention that connected to all that crew that I mentioned before is obviously you have video switchers, and you have lights, and you have cabling, and you have all sorts of, we like to call them gizmos, that can take one kind of signal and turn it into another one, so that's appropriate for the workflow. Audio goes on and on and on. It depends on the size of the event. But for live streaming, the most important piece of equipment is an encoder that you use that takes that line cut, whether it's multi-camera or single camera, and is recording at a very high bit rate for broadcast quality, right, like TV broadcast quality, and take it and put it into a machine that gets it web ready and can add all the graphics, send it to the right back end, Encoder, Bright Cove, and all the other outlets we've talked to, and have that be stream ready.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the word encoder, and I think for the sake of our audience, this is about live streaming, so we'll focus on the encoder. And could you kind of elaborate more on the role of the encoder and kind of at what point and what do you guys
Sure,
do for
sure.
it? Yeah.
So we, again, this is what we do for a living. We're streaming experts. We're not an AV company. We stay up on the latest and greatest. We have engineers, not just stream techs, who are constantly keeping up with what's happening, day to day, week to week, in the changes in specs and requirements that we have out there for the different platforms. And even the Bright Cove player will have improvements, and we need to respond to that, right? But we also have used many great encoders from other companies that build just fantastic pieces of equipment. The reason that we build our custom encoders is because we want to bench test them weekly, make sure they work with the latest and greatest. We can modify them very easily, and believe me, the marketers and event planners and executives on the client end, they're not some of them are, but they're not necessarily technicians. They say, hey, I heard that you can do A, B, and C, but now I heard this week you can do D, E, F. I want D, E, and F, right? And our answer needs to be, oh, that's no problem. We can provide that. In fact, we have GHI too. So, I mean, we bench test weekly, we update, we have other kinds of apparatus on our custom encoders that allow us to do things like have redundant records, upload to servers, trim the highlights for people, and have a lot of redundancy involved.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's important. So once that encoder has the video file feed from the direct line from the video, it gets uploaded to the internet, and that's where really Bright Cove and other platforms take over, which is the transcoding and making sure that the device, the actual stream, so that people can watch this on any device that they're playing. So you can go on your mobile phone and watch this. You can go on your desktop. You can go to OTT apps as well for if you're building TV apps. So that's really where it's important to have both the hardware and the software side play well together. Before we end with the technical questions, I think we had a couple great questions that came in throughout, and I think one person is curious what Molly's role is.
Yeah. So it's my mistake. Sorry out there in internet land. I thought that we had an additional robotic camera hooked up, and we probably didn't do that because I'm not a big fan of robotic cameras, and for all purposes, because they just don't look as good as something that's operated by a cam op, and that it has frankly, the cameras we use have much better glass, much better lenses, and have a better broadcast look. But Molly, who's sitting right over there, and you can't see her, is a expert camera operator, so expert that she resides in another city, and we brought her out to help us with this event. So Molly,
thank you, Molly.
She does much more than that, though. Jack of all trades.
She was here early at 7 a.m.
That's right.
So
she knows how to produce and direct and do all sorts of kinds of things. So,
and then another great question that came in, and before we move on, is around how are these clips already on Twitter? I think you mentioned it previously, but people are seeing that the clips are showing up on Twitter, and we're still just live streaming this.
Well, first of all, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's very important to have heat around your event while it's happening with the advent of social media. And again, it's the social media, something like on Twitter, using the Twitter native player, it's a different kind of curation, right? That you can have your tweet, you can have handles, you have hashtags, but also in that player, you can have calls to action which drive people to the long forms or your property or your funnel that you've developed. But the important thing is that the attention span on social is very short. And so we've developed a very quick turnaround to during the event. Now this can happen, you can orchestrate this for a VOD too, to have campaigns, even promoted campaigns, where you can fulfill sponsorships and guarantee the number of impressions and plays that you're going to have on a platform like that. And so we have the apparatus to have our people either do the editorial or work with the client end editorial, like we just did an event in New York where we were sitting with a big, I'll just mention it, Glamour magazine team, right? Our two editors had about 15 people over their shoulders, and they smiled the whole time while everybody was making demands on them. And cutting these highlights of Nicole Kidman, of Samantha Bee, of Maxine Waters, on stage while it was happening. And the viewership to the actual full player, the broadcast, was growing during the event because we're able to get these little clips out during the event.
Absolutely. Well,
pretty great.
In the interest of time, let's move beyond the technical questions and go to the next section where we're going to kind of go back to the strategy. I think it's a nice segue from what you were just talking about, which is, you just finished your event, and we'll probably do this ourselves with this awesome,
we will.
Amazing
we
live
will,
stream.
because we were 5 minutes late, weren't we?
So what it's really about, okay, what you should do after that event so that the next time you do this, you can be more successful, or it can be a bigger audience, or the technical aspects go better. What can you, who's in that room, and what should you be talking about?
Well, first of all, I mean, it starts with, you set out goals beforehand, hopefully, right? And were those goals met? Right? That's the general general idea of having a postmortem or analysis, a post-event analysis. And so when you ask that general question, it answered your question, which is, who can respond to if those goals were met? So on the client end, you have the marketers, you have the event planners, you have your main liaison there. It can be, everybody from our end, salesperson, customer relations person, right? Those kind of people, the marketing people on our end. But then also there are a lot of events where we're interfacing with third parties. Obviously, bigger companies might hire an agency or an event planner, right? And so anybody who's appropriate. And so that's a long way of saying it. The short way is the stakeholders need to be in that meeting, right? And you need to talk about what worked. It's great to say, listen, we met all our goals. And we often have this situation where we're so successful, and we've met all our goals that were set out at the beginning, but we still learned things that we could do better the next time. Right?
Absolutely.
So you need to talk about eliminating unnecessary elements that cost money and time, staying abreast of the latest and greatest and all these things like that, and also saying wow, we touched on this new feature or this new way to do it, or I learned something from an attendee mentioned something, and usually the question is, the client learns something and they ask us, is that possible? And again, I'll circle back to the, differentiator here, where it's we pride ourselves at being able to say, yes, that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've had that meeting and you're starting to act on that change. Maybe just give an example of one of those recommendations, because I think a great example of a success that could be better, which is viewership. And you could be in that meeting and say, well, we had 1 million people watch the stream, so we can't do any better. But the reality is, how do you get to 2 million?
Right.
And so what's that?
Well, here's a perfect example. This is a very boiled down, understandable example. We have a lot of clients that are very, very high-end publishers, and they have very sophisticated marketing teams. So much so that they will have an expert just social team, and they know how to reach their audience and get millions of interactions. Now you'll also discover that the corporation, the publisher, has a great sales team, and they can have on print or their website where they're just selling to all sorts of sponsors, right? And they don't think about that there can be impressions fulfilled through the live stream. Right. So that's a really great example, and it can be encouraging and frustrating when you find out there are 8 million interactions through. Everybody did the highlights in this really great way and all these kinds of things, and there was no sponsorship sold into there, and there was no funnel really built to point people back to where their gallery instances or the call to action of whatever they want to accomplish. Like, for instance, for a publication, maybe having people more subs, people subscribe. So the challenge is that sales team knows how to sell into all these platforms, but they're not talking to each other. And so in this new world, you'd be surprised how print's not talking to digital or vice versa. And someone said to me, I had a meeting in New York with an agency yesterday, and they said, wow, if we would have had, we did an event a couple of weeks ago that got a lot of action, and they said that audience would be perfect. We owe Mercedes-Benz 10 million impressions. They owe them. They paid for them. And they said, if we had the, opportunity to use those interactions, that's the perfect target market. as Mercedes was trying to reach, and we would have fulfilled those already.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to take that disconnect and make it be a
Absolutely.
connect.
So, I think in the interest of time, I want to talk a little bit more about the use cases and how we're seeing video be used in your actual business outcomes.
Right.
And so the main three that I talk about, or that we talk about at Brightcove a lot, are internal communications, B2B marketing and B2C marketing.
Right.
We both have customers across
all
those
of
spectrums.
those, yeah.
So let's start with internal communications.
Sure.
And why do you see people live streaming their communications, their town halls, product launches internally?
Right. Well, internal comms have been a thing forever, right? And the main reasons to have internal comms could be the CEO needs to announce a merger.
Yep.
Or there's a new product line, or there's an annual town hall, right, where everybody should be participating. And of course, the old way of doing things was to spend an immense amount of money, time. You need a bigger venue maybe because you're all hands. Room at headquarters isn't big enough to house everybody. Put people up in hotels and things like that. It's incredibly expensive to do that.
Yep.
And on the other hand, you don't want to just save money by just having the management team show up for some of these things, because then you're not creating that great morale by having everybody be able to participate, right? So what you can do is fly some of the people in that need to have other kinds of meetings surrounding that kind of event, but use live streaming in order for people to watch it and still have that community being built around your company. In not just different cities and regions, but it could be all over the world, and we've done that quite a bit. The other thing is with some of the features that we've been talking about, you can have, again, a online, full-featured, full-resolution experience where there's interaction, and you're not just watching it on, a webinar page. Like you see this, if we had wanted to arrange it, we could be talking to one of your colleagues in the Brightcove Boston office and switch between the two of them, and we're not sitting there tiled on something that looks kind of, not top-notch, right?
So I think an example that we've worked on together that I like to talk about is Smithfield Foods. And,
right.
And you can find their bacon in your grocery store.
Like I said, you had me at bacon.
Yeah, exactly.
You had me at bacon.
And their challenge is they're one of the largest distributors of pork in the country, and they have about 50,000 employees across the world. Yeah. So a huge reach that that the executive team needs to take on. And so, you can do email, you can send out a video on demand, but that's not special. That doesn't create that sense of community that you're talking about, where you're trying to mimic and save cost, obviously. And the outcome is they came to us and said, hey, we need a solution to live stream this. We need a solution that allows us to ensure that the messaging for the vision of our company and any new updates to the company was being spread throughout the company. It's a very top-down communication approach, but while building that community at the same time, because you're taking that feedback, that instantaneous feedback. And the reason why it's successful is because the employees know it's important to listen. Because if it only happens, say, quarterly, they're going to show up to that event. They're going to show up in one big room in their regional offices. They're going to watch the event. They may have a regional breakout session, and it creates this sense of community.
Right, a workshop following it.
You're not disconnected. And I think I really like that example because it's such a common problem that even small companies face when they're spread out. So changing gears to kind of
the other element that we haven't talked about is there's an immediacy.
Yeah.
There's an immediacy to that approach. And so if you do make, and by the way, you can turn it into VOD video afterwards. But what we've seen is that, especially with internal comms, if you say we've made this, we went and interviewed CEOs, and then we do the post-production on it, and it may even be able to look higher production value because you're editing it afterwards and introducing all these other kinds of graphic elements and things like that. But the immediacy, when a CEO says, we're having a company-wide event that's happening at this time.
Yep.
That sense of immediacy brings in more employees, that you're guaranteed to have viewership for that.
Exactly.
That immediacy means it's important. It's important to the executive team. It's important to everybody to participate. Whereas an on-demand version can be like, well, yeah, I'm going to get to that sometime.
Yep.
You know?
You have to create that sense of urgency, even when they're already employed and they're engaged.
Exactly.
You have to. So,
exactly.
And speaking of urgency, B2B marketing.
Yeah.
It's all about creating that sense of urgency
That's
because
right.
the sales cycle is so long.
That's
it
right.
can be a year, and you only have a chance, once a year, once every couple of years, to close a deal in B2B sales. So, their common use case of live streaming is the conferences that we've mentioned over and over today.
Sure.
And I think just this year we've done live events with AppNexus, EMC, VMware World, and we've also worked with on the Oracle Modern Marketing Experience. We live streamed that event, and we actually used the gallery site page here, and I think it might be on the screen. So you can take a look at the Oracle Live Gallery site page right here. So these are really, that's kind of what we're working on these days. So these are great events, and really, I think a great example of what we should be talking about is kind of the strategies that these companies are employing. And an example of this is a big B2B company in Silicon Valley. And we did this event together as well. And we really took it to them and said, hey, let's do an event in a box. Let us show you how to do this.
That's right.
And they really put their trust in us. We built a lot of trust. And so we provided them everything from the pre-production help to the production help to the landing page of a gallery landing page, being able to track that viewership. So they're using Marketo, so you're able to actually track who's watching it by using the Brightcove Audience product on top of the Brightcove player. So you're able to see who that stream, who's watching that stream. And engagement and measuring engagement is so important in B2B marketing. And so after the event, they didn't just throw the stream up. They created a post-event state that actually had chapters so that it could break up the content for that for those salespeople, marketing team inside that company for further analysis of that engagement. So to tie it all together, like live stream should be treated like any other campaign. It needs to be measured.
It should.
It needs to be tied to business outcomes.
That's right.
And you have to plan it.
That's right.
So that's really about.
Well, so here's a term: lead generation.
Yes.
Lead generation. Now, lead generation is filling out a form, whether it's in the old days, on the clipboard, on the table at the event, or lead generation forms in things like that on top of a page in a live stream player, all these kinds of things. I almost don't like that term when it applies to digital, because you're basically making that viewer do some work, and you're going to turn away some viewers. Now, some bigger companies that are selling, huge network servers, for instance, and their aim is to bring in 1,000 people and convert 3 of them. That works. But there's all sorts of ways that you can do that and have a much larger audience and drive them through what we're talking about, curated experience. Bring them in. Don't just have it be the one thing that might turn them away. Bring them in to the event, send them to the gallery page, have the gallery page and messaging and forms and lead generation happening there. So you're not using any viewership. You don't know, you're in sales, you don't know at what point that individual may convert. You don't know. And so the first thing that you have to say to yourself is, I don't want to lose them from the beginning, possibly. I want to have a plan that guides them in, and then I've got them, right, and things like that. And that's where we've seen the most success. Again, the funnel. When the client understands that you should use this content and this new technology to bring the audience into your brand world and be pushing your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, I want to let you speak about an example of B2C marketing, and this has obviously been going along a lot longer than B2B marketing with live stream. So what's an example where you guys have seen a successful B2C event?
Well, like for instance, of course, it's a B2B relationship, but we did just do, as I mentioned before, a New York Fashion Week event where we did a television broadcast, 5-camera shoot, handheld, robotics, doing a sizzle reel beforehand, and things like that. So it was streamed to 28 different territories around the world, right? 30 different 30 different live stream instances at once using FORA.tv Blast, right? In 28 countries. Okay, and so what's so great about this is that and this was a product launch. This is a product launch. So each one of these territories, and we interacted with all their marketing teams, all their digital marketing teams, all 30 of these instances, all 28 countries. Of course, they can surround their campaign metadata, their messaging, and all these kinds of things, and cater to their individual consumer base. Maybe their customers are slightly different in Barcelona, than they are in Munich. So it's a great example. Now, this was also can live afterwards at a very high level because this was television. It was a custom set with custom set design. It was kind of a cross between retail store launching the product, a rave, a club thing.
Lots of environments to work with, too.
Oh my goodness, and we were there with our handheld before the event started in the evening and created a same-day sizzle, which we distributed and used for playback. Hey, the making of, with the time lapse of building the set over the previous 3 days and seeing the unnamed, rock star model entrepreneur beforehand, before she went to makeup and put her outfit on for the actual shoot. So she's interacting with the regular people and things like that. Very charming, and it just brings people in, right? Yeah. That's not online streaming with your iPhone.
No, you can't do that with a simple
that's
Periscope stream.
That's television online.
Yep.
And that's what we need to be really pushing to people is that the quality and production value and thoughtfulness by which the marketing campaign is put together and the distribution, right, is really matters. Not holding up your iPhone and doing a Facebook Live or a Periscope stream using your iPhone's audio to get your brand out there.
Yeah.
That's poor brand representation.
Yeah. So I could go on and ask you more questions about that production and other productions that you've done. I think in the interest of time and to be fair to our audience, we have about a few minutes left.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll answer one or two Q&A from the audience. I want to ask this one because I'm actually very curious about this, which is how long before the event should I begin planning? Like at what point do you say, oh crap, I need to start planning?
Well, first of all, technically speaking, we don't like to say this too often, but we know how to pull these things off in short order technically, okay? But just like anything else, the longer the lead time you have, the better. I mean, we're talking to one of our clients, I'll just mention it at Vanity Fair for the After Oscars party, and we started talking pretty much a month after the last one ended. And so they're not talking. They know that we've been working together for a long time now, and we know that they have faith in us to pull off the technical end of it. But what's different this year? What kind of updates, like we were talking about? What's possible?
Yeah.
So the more planning, the better. But if you're not planning this thing 6 weeks out,
it's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough to put together that campaign. Not getting us engaged technically, that campaign, and have
it's almost the technical aspects are not the thing that you really need to plan far in advance. It's getting all the teams to communicate to make sure that the campaign. So I think the last question I'll answer before I wrap up is, or ask, sorry, not answer. I'm not going to answer. You're answering.
Well,
so
you know some things.
So can you define digestible content? I think you mentioned it pretty early in our discussion, which is using, I think it was Boost to send out digestible content.
Right.
To
Well, we call our service,
and I think Sean has an example of what we could roll to just show it while you talk over it.
Sure. I mean, basically, Boost is cutting these in real time during the event, digestible pieces of content that are pushed out to social media and other kinds of places. They can double up and be used as highlights in a carousel for your on-demand later too, like in your gallery instance and things like that, that push people to wherever you want to push them, right? To the funnel, to conversion. And what's so great on that's probably around 30-second clips. Short attention span. Think commercial. Think highlight. Right.
Like 20, 30 seconds.
Right. Exactly. It can be up to a minute and things like that. But just think about how you like to buzz around watching these highlights that may draw you in to read an entire article. On NewYorkTimes.com or something like that. you read the, oh, that sounds interesting, then you read the whole thing, or watch a full-time or full-length event. So it's very, very powerful stuff. I mean, this is, you can work this into promoted campaigns again. I'll just mention, the Twitter native player and a promoted tweet campaign where you can guarantee the number of impressions to a sponsor or to a client, right? How great is that? That's when the live streaming, I always like to say, our best situation is when the client gets it.
Yep.
The sales team on the client side gets it. And we shift, FORA and Bright Cove shifts from a line item expense to a profit center.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. That's the idea.
Right?
How do you make live streaming profitable?
That's right.
That's the important part.
That's right.
If you think with that mindset, you start getting more creative and you start thinking about the importance of all these.
And just to mention, I know we're running out of time, but what's so great, again, I just love this example of the Twitter, and there's other platforms that do this, and the Bright Cove player does this, but the Twitter native player, a place where everybody is watching and consuming content and tweets and things like that, and marketing, you have the campaign with the guaranteed impressions. But everybody's always saying, well, we don't want to do that because we want to do this. And we say, you can do it all at once. In other words, you can have your tweet underneath your little piece of content that has the messaging in it for your internal branding, hashtags and handles of your star speakers that are up there. So you're getting their audiences in, right? Organic and, promoted, so non-organic. And then through the calls to action that are overlays right in the video player, you can have an actionable, clickable kind of action that drives them back to, say, Bright Cove Gallery, where they can watch the entire curated experience. And certainly, that I call that a conversion. And you can guide them through that funnel and have them take all sorts of different kinds of actions once they get there.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up, the most important thing to take away, I think, from this whole discussion is really be conscious of that experience that you're creating for the viewer. Be really conscious of what you want that viewer to do once they're in that live stream and how you can get them to convert. So, Bob, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and to the audience, we really appreciate your time, and we hope to do this again sooner than later. If you have ideas on different topics outside of live streaming that you'd like us to tackle at Bright Cove, we're happy to take that into account as we plan our next event.
Thank you, Eric. I will add to that and say that we've had a great audience here today.
Yes.
And so there are many questions that were asked that we didn't get to.
Yep.
And we're going to be sure to
we'll follow up.
We'll follow up
and
on
then,
those questions.
If we also have a couple handouts that will be followed up in the email. If you were pre-registered for this event, that will be followed up. And then if you have not registered, you can reach out to my colleague, Caitlin Bowes. Her email should be up on the screen shortly. And you can find that contact information. But thank you very much, and see you guys soon.